Hi, I'm Cheyenne Dirksen-Schroeder, Managing Editor of the Hutchinson News, and today we're interviewing some of our City Council candidates here in Hutch. Go ahead and tell us your name, what you're running for, and a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. My name is David Inskeep. I am currently on the City Council in the at-large position. I also hold the position of the mayor for this year. I am rerunning for election for the at-large position, another 2-year term. That's basically where I'm at.
Sure, excellent. Tell me a little bit about the council's efforts in improving Hutchinson's economy. We've had some major bumps during the time that you've been on the council, so it's always tough to kind of respond to things like that.
Sure. Yeah, the economy is it's obviously on everybody's mind. We very much so on ours as well. We are doing a lot of different things to try and create economic development by looking at our different incentive tools, things that we have in our war chest to help us draw business to Hutchinson. Absolutely, we had a spat of business closings during the time that I've been on the council. It happened on my watch. It wasn't necessarily a reflection of things that were going on with that council per se. I think there's been a huge change in the retail environment, online presence, a lot of different things. Most of those closings were in the retail and probably the restaurant sector. But those are jobs, and we look to fill those. We don't actively look to solicit restaurants and things, but if they do open, we embrace them and we bring them on board. The type of economic development I'm referring to would be your larger businesses. We have a lot of vacant lots in the industrial park that we'd like to see get filled, and we're actively working with the chamber to solicit groups that can do that from within and without. And then I have a high regard for entrepreneurship. I think Hutchinson itself was founded on entrepreneurship with the Careys and Salt, then flash forward a few years to the Dillons of the world, the Lowens, a lot of different groups that chose to start and open businesses here. Subsequently, some of those have changed hands, and you find that when that occurs, oftentimes decisions are made from abroad and not from within, and so then oftentimes we're just a spot on the map, and if it's not producing like other areas, we can be a casualty. So I think by fostering more entrepreneur growth from within, that maybe we can gain back some of that control. And some of our best businesses are small businesses that may only employ 2-3 people, but some of those can expand and be the next Dillons, the next Lowens, the next so on, and be a multi-level, multinational type group.
Do you think those efforts have been successful, or would you consider them to be successful?
Absolutely. It's a work in progress, right? And so we didn't get into the shifting economic change that we're into today overnight, nor will we necessarily get out of it. I think all the right players and all the right pieces are in place. The key stakeholders that I've been in conversations with are on the education side, the high school and the college. They're hitting our younger folks and our college-age kids. With community college, also your non-traditional students that might be interested in entrepreneurship. And then we also have the chamber actively involved. There's a task force I sit on that goes by the name of the Entrepreneurship Task Force that also has representatives from the county. So I think all the right players are at the table. Funding was an obstacle, but due to some funding sources through the Community Foundation, and then ultimately the county and the city stepped up to the table and provided some additional funding. That, coupled with what was already going on at the Quest Center and the work that the chamber is doing, I think can bear real fruit. So I don't know that I can point to any instances today, but I think we're going to see some real groundswell as we keep going.
Sure. Tell me a little bit more about the choice to specifically target entrepreneurship. So that hires maybe 2 to 3 people at once, whereas if you targeted a manufacturing type business, you'd get 100 employees right away.
Sure. And I don't think those are necessarily mutually exclusive. It's not that we're precluding that, but I feel like the chamber is doing a good job, in my opinion, of actively soliciting those type of businesses.
Sure.
Also, those are sometimes once in a year, once in a 5-year, once in a decade type of situations where you land a group that's going to have a hiring of in excess of 100 people. oftentimes even the smaller wins that we get, they make promises that they will get to 100 employees, but that will be over a 3-year period. We are not looking to quit looking for those opportunities, but I think the Chamber is doing a great job of soliciting those. What I would like to see is this to backfill some of that. We know also that within the entrepreneurship space and with any new business, there's a risk that you might not make it. But if we have a pipeline, if you will, full of those types of opportunities, for the few that don't make it, there will be opportunities that do survive. And of those, some may never grow beyond the 2 to 3 people, but they will contribute. They may own property. They'll definitely pay payroll taxes. Depending on if they sell a widget or whatever, they will pay sales taxes. So they will contribute. And again, that control comes back to a local control, and the dollars stay local. Some of these larger corporations, some of that money goes back overseas or to another state, and that's fine. Those wages still stay here, but you find with the more of the mom and pop shops, or even larger than that, but homegrown, home-owned businesses, so many more of the dollars stay local. So not that we're going to ignore those opportunities. If somebody comes along and they say they want to open up shop and they're willing to provide hundreds of jobs, we will definitely entertain that and do what we can to help accommodate them to come. But the entrepreneurship is near and dear to me as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner. I know the value of that.
Okay. Let's talk budget. How does the Hutchinson city budget currently stack up to similar cities or matching sister cities? Are we shoulder to shoulder on debt management, spending distribution?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. And I will tell you that I'm fairly well versed with our budget, only because I've poured over those books over and over.
Sure.
I have a cursory.
Break it down to layman's terms of.
Fair enough. You said sister cities, and some of the comparable cities, and some are more comparable than others that we are held up against. Some of our neighboring cities are like a McPherson or a Salina, even a Newton down the street, fair or unfair, those are who we're held up against. But we are unique to them. In our geography, in our populace, our different regional partners and things like that. But I would say that we are, from a debt management standpoint, I would suggest we might even, from a debt load standpoint, I think we might even be ahead of some of those. Some of them have taken on some major projects in the recent years that has built upon that. But that is it. It is somewhat cyclical. Sometimes your debt is way down, and other times as you choose to proceed certain projects and whatever they might be, then you'll start to rise. We have some big things coming up on the horizon that we need to be considerate of with regards to our stormwater infrastructure, and then also our wastewater infrastructure. Our system is actually very antiquated. They don't even make parts for our stuff anymore. So we have to scramble to find those. Well, in order to get around that before it becomes completely antiquated, we have and are working towards replacement pumps for our wastewater management. With that in mind, we're going to incur more debt in doing so because that will be a bondable issue. But everything I've read, everything I see, and definitely from our bond counsel suggests that we are well within our means based on our size and our income and our revenues that we have.
Sure, okay. So being decent stewards of tax dollars.
I'd like to think so. I'm sure other people tell me
Sure.
otherwise, but we are very mindful of that, and yes, I think so.
Okay. At the City Council forum that the Chamber of Commerce hosted recently, sure. We talked a little bit about building codes, the Trades Commission, that kind of thing. Should downtown building codes be relaxed? Are they a huge detriment to starting businesses?
Sure.
Tell me about regulations.
Absolutely. It's somewhat in the eye of the beholder, obviously. The codes, and you heard this at the forum, I know you were there obviously, but those who might have attended or watched it in review, codes are necessary. Every code that's within the book has some sort of a reasoning for why it was created, whether it be a health and safety issue, to accommodate ADA standards, various other things of the like. I don't feel that the code that we've adopted, which is the International Property Maintenance Code and the building codes that we apply towards our downtown, are necessarily any more rigid. But I think we as a council need to review those, and we're actively doing so through the Building Trades Board and some other opportunities to see if it's right-sized for our community and if all codes are applicable. One of the ones that came up multiple years ago, a couple years ago anyways, was the water fountain issue. There were some specifications, and it's been a minute since I've talked about it, so I don't recall exactly, but there was opportunity, or excuse me, there was requirements that you had to put in a water fountain if you had certain other requirements or whatever. We felt that that wasn't necessarily appropriate in all situations, and so we pulled that out of the code. That's just an example, but we're reviewing all of those. I will tell you that it's much more challenging when it comes down to a life safety issue, things like that, because not only are you beholden to the building maintenance codes, but you're also beholden to the fire code. And sometimes they intermesh, and whereas we as a council might have some leeway on this, we have very little discretion when it comes to the fire code. That is mandated at a much higher, the state fire marshal level, and we don't have any say over that. But always looking for deals. Sometimes we don't always recognize it until someone brings it to our attention. Hey, I had a project and this was an obstacle. How can we not make that an obstacle for someone going forward? And we pose that to the trades board. They then give us an offering of why they think it should or should not change. And then if it makes sense to do so, we try and react accordingly. I think you'll see that the downtown area with regards to commercial, and then the southern part of town, and I would include probably from 11th south, you'll find some relaxed codes in the residential side as well. Some setbacks that are no longer requirements. How can we very well tell people that they can't park their car, for example, on their yard, but then not allow them to build a garage because the setbacks weren't appropriate? The lots in that area of town are much smaller. The homes fill up more of the lots. It's hard to meet those accommodations. We recognize that, we adapted to it, we changed it, and in most situations those individuals can now build an accessory structure that the formula for it is not as rigid as, say, the northern part of town, which again, we're all one city, but we're on different lot structures. This is the older piece of town, and we want to encourage those folks, not discourage those folks from bettering their properties and doing all that. So okay. I think you'll find there's some changes in the works.
Excellent. Let's stay close to downtown. The news sent out a questionnaire for profiles on each of the city council candidates a few weeks back here, and one of the questions that we asked was to name an expenditure that the city should reduce or eliminate, or an area that the city should spend more. And you mentioned Memorial Hall as sort of an area that could use a little bit more attention. Could you tell me more about that?
Absolutely. And anybody who's lived in Hutchinson for any amount of time knows that Memorial Hall is in some regards, a beloved treasure, and others view it as a bit of an albatross. It is. It's a historical piece of our architecture. There's a ton of history behind it, and I think, in my opinion, it should be preserved. But I think it's being grossly underutilized and over-subsidized at this point. So I've been, during certain council sessions and then on my own, trying to explore opportunities with different groups. I've had brief conversations with the new administrator at the Fox Theater about how he might be able to incorporate it into some of his programming for the Fox, and then maybe include Memorial Hall in a larger, broader project, and different things like that, because it pains me to see it deteriorate and it also only get utilized, say, 2 to 3 times a year for great, very wonderful, if you've ever had the chance to attend one, plays and events. But literally where it only holds a handful of activities a year. The amount of money that we put into it, I think there's a line item that we pushed for replacing the floor, and if memory serves, I don't have it in front of me, I think it's a $30,000 ticket to replace the floor in there. It's necessary, it needs to be done, but before we spend that money, I would want to have much greater conversations about the future of it, what we intend to use it for, and go from there. So that is why I landed on that one as a downtown project that I would want to explore further.
Sure. Tell me about an aspect of you or your story, your past history, that isn't typical of a public servant but will assist you on the city council.
Sure, okay, yeah, great question. My background, I guess. The fact that I lived in Hutchinson, spent my formative years here, went to school here, grew up here, left Hutchinson. I think I'm not slighting anybody who's been born, raised, and stayed in Hutchinson, but I subscribe to the fact that if you have an opportunity to get outside of your own confines, it does have a tendency to broaden your horizons. You get to interact with different individuals from different perspectives and different walks of life. Having then left and joined the Navy, not only did I get out of Hutchinson and out of Kansas, there were times where I got out of the continental United States and got to meet not only different people from different parts of the United States that I served with, but then also individuals from other countries in Asia, in Southeast Asia, and just different places like that. That helped form a lot of my basis on my feelings towards diversity and embracing different cultures and different walks of life. Flash forward, I'm getting out of the service, and I had an opportunity to go anywhere. I could stay where I was at, which was Washington State. I could pick a place out of the hat, but I chose Hutchinson, and I convinced my, at the time, girlfriend, fiance, whatever you want to word it, wife now, that I thought that our best opportunity was in Hutchinson. I championed it then, and I champion it now.
Why?
Because I knew that my family was a success here. I'd seen other people be a success here. We were in Washington State. The cost of living was exceptionally high. I knew that was a lot different here. And I knew a lot of people, and I knew the opportunities that were available when I'd left. I also knew that my family, although we're nobody special by any means, but the name was a known commodity. My father was a longtime commercial lender. He knew a lot of people. He helped them with their businesses and so on. I thought I could possibly leverage those relationships to my advantage as well. I also knew we had a great educational system. My wife wanted to finish up her college career that she started in Washington State. And so those things appeared readily available to take advantage of. Flash forward again, we come back to Hutchinson. My first job was as a carpenter. I was not a very good carpenter, but it taught me to be somewhat detail-oriented. I worked with a different set of people that work with their hands, very manual labor, and then I interacted with the customers as we had to install cabinetry and different things like that, which allowed me to find out that I had a little bit of a gift of conversationalism and such. Flash forward another step, I end up working for Consolidated Manufacturing, which is a business that's no longer here, but I was tearing down engines for a living. Greasy, come home every day, covered head to toe. Hard work. Wake up at the crack of dawn, sometimes earlier so we could dismiss earlier because the heat was overwhelming in the buildings. Having had those experiences, having worked as a blue-collar worker and then most recently as a white-collar worker, allows me the ability to relate, if you will, to those in those positions and not feel like I don't have some ability to recognize what they may or may not be going through. Same thing, my housing accommodations, when we first moved back, our first home was of a mobile variety. And proud of it, that's where we started our little family and went from there. We parlayed that when we sold it and bought an investment property, parlayed those two and bought a little larger home. Lived in that for 2 to 3 years, a larger and still, and I really feel that that is somewhat the American dream, but the Hutchinson dream, you know. And so with those baby steps, if you will, I think that is what leads me to believe, and I feel confident in this, that I can relate to most individuals in Hutchinson because at some point in my life, I've lived in a lot of the stages that they currently reside in, even to this day. Maybe?
Sure. Okay. When faced with cutting vital services or raising taxes, how do you respond?
Also a good question and a very difficult question. We've been faced with that a lot as of late. We've tasked the city during the budgetary process, John in particular, but then his staff a step lower, to look for extra cuts. The easy cuts are easy, if you will. Let's just kick that purchase of that truck down the road. We should be able to drive this for 1 more year. Well, that really doesn't get you anything. You've only deferred that. The harder cuts are the ones that I think you're referring to, which is the people. It makes up roughly 75% of the budget. It's not only payroll, but it's benefits and other things. So it's a large part of it. If you cut people, you inevitably are going to cut your services to them. Streets will not get paved as quickly or potholes fixed as rapidly. Ditches will not be mowed as quickly, so on and so forth. So we're trying to be mindful of the tax dollars that are available to us, respectful of our employees, and still deliver a service product to the city that is quality and that they're expecting. With that being said, during the last budgetary process, we asked for those deep cuts again. We were able to do some. We found some efficiencies in some positions that we're able to collaborate. But I'm somewhat proud that we did ask for a modest mill increase of 0.31, I believe. But out of that, we were also able to fund that entrepreneurship program that I talked about, which is a new venture, and I think will have merit. And we're also able to find a pay increase for some of our employees as well, a lion's share of our employees. I bring that up because we were also losing some of our good employees from the public sector to the private sector. When you think of police officers and fire, they often transition from one security role to another within that same field. But a mechanic, an engineer, a guy in public works, he can get a job somewhere else and get paid $5 more per hour. He might be inclined to do that. And we were finding that we were losing some good help that way. So again, it's a balancing act. I'm not a huge proponent of raising the mill, but in order to keep our revenues constant, afford a pay increase so that we could retain good help and maintain good services, I thought the small mill increase was appropriate at that time.
Sure. Those are my main questions. Is there another topic that you'd like to talk about we haven't covered yet?
How about those Chiefs? No, I'm just kidding. But I am a Chiefs fan.
Sure.
Don't hold that against me either. No, I think those are some good ones. I recently attended, it's topical, so I recently attended last night another forum. This one was put on by the NAACP. Its format was more around the notion of diversity and discrimination and the like. We had a very lively discussion. I'm not sure if anybody will have access to that didn't attend last night, but I would challenge anybody who's watching to engage with your candidate choices and ask them some of the hard questions. They were asked last night, and there were some good answers, some interesting answers as well on all sides. Other than that, you know, I'm an open book. I'm easily accessible through the city website. All my information is listed on their email and phone number. I am also on Facebook personally. I don't know how to privatize my profile, so I think you can get me either way. But I also have a city council, Dave Inskeep for City Council Facebook page. We are also conducting a thing that my daughter came up with recently. It's called Citizen Saturdays, and it's an opportunity to reach out to me through Facebook to ask me some of these questions. And then I'll guarantee that I'll get your response on Saturday, the following Saturday by 1 p.m. I'll read off the questions and the subsequent answers, and then we'll just repeat the process. Try and become more engaged. Some people weren't reaching out with email, some were. This is an attempt at a different platform to do so. Those are the things I can think of anyways.
Sure. Well, hey, thank you so much for speaking with me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.